Farmers, trust is everything. At Genesis Fertilizers, we're not just proposing to build a facility, we're building a future designed for you. With real progress already underway, we're closer to providing Western Canadian farmers with a reliable, locally produced fertilizer supply. Now is the time to take control of your farm's future. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
It's time for RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Tuesday, December 17th, and I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. It is Tuesdays with Lyndsey, but today I am not alone. Oh no, I am not alone. I have with me Amber Bell. She's our field editor out of Alberta. Welcome here, Amber.
Thanks, Lyndsey.
All right,
I'm really excited.
Good, because the reason you're here is that today's show is actually all content that you have gathered. I am really just a placeholder here. But tell our good folks here on RealAg Radio, what was the event last week? Give us your thoughts on it.
Right. So this past week, I was at the Western Canada Conference on Soil Health and Grazing, and it is one that I've attended many times in the past. It is an incredible conference of crazy list of speakers. They started off fairly small back in the 90s, as you will hear, and the energy there is insane. So it's based around soil health and grazing. So a lot of different concepts brought up. There are so many researchers in the room, so many scientists in the room, and a ton of producers at the same time as well. So you really get that mix. And a lot of people have been coming to the conference for, the past 5, 6, 7, 8 conferences. And there's still that sense of networking, that sense of energy, just a lot of fun. It's a great time.
Mm-hmm. And something, of course, that, perhaps not shared by everyone, but the grazing aspect and the soil health aspect, fascinating for many. So I'm super looking forward to this because this is all in my wheelhouse, of course. So a little bit jealous that you got to go and hang out. But we are going to hear on today's show from Grant Lastiwka, Bart Lardner, Kevin Elmy, and what is the last one? The profitability in ranching. Who's our last guest for today?
Burke Teichert.
Yes. All right. Okay. So out of these, now this is only a selection of the things you got from this day. So that's going to be on today's show, but there will be more over on RealAgriculture.com. But Amber, walk us through sort of, we've chosen these pieces. How do they all sort of fit together?
So a lot of them talked about cover cropping. We're starting off with Grant Lastiwka, who's actually talking about the conference and where it started off from. He has attended every single one of these since the 90s, and they run every 2 years. That's quite a few conferences. And anyone that knows Grant Lastiwka knows that he is super passionate about forages. So we start off with him talking about forages and the changes he's seen throughout the years. And then we go into a couple of the other speakers there. So Kevin Elmy speaks about cover crops, and that's his thing. His background is he's considered one of the experts in cover crops in Western Canada. So he's going to be speaking about cover crops and speaking about corn. And then we have Bart Lardner, who is speaking a little more generically about winter feeding methods, which of course, again, speaks to that cover crop idea. I think we actually talked a little bit about swath grazing and bale grazing and some of the other different winter feeding methods. And then we go into Burke Teichert, and Burke Teichert and I talked a lot about profitability in ranching, and again, broached that winter feeding topic. So yeah. It's a lot of fun. It's a good lineup.
Well, it's December. What more is there to talk about than winter feeding? I mean,
we're in Canada.
Yeah, it's pretty darn important. There's snow, and we have to deal with it. Now, I wanted to quickly share. So Grant Lastiwka, of course, we had him on the Farming Forward series. We've got Kevin Elmy. I actually interviewed probably at the beginning of my career. So that's how long he's been at this and doing some really cool stuff as well. And Bart Lardner, of course, had on the agronomist as well. So super exciting. So maybe some familiar names, definitely some big names within this this space. And as I mentioned, of course, there's plenty more of the coverage from this conference. You can head on over to realagriculture.com, but Amber did all of those. So, Amber, thank you so much. In thinking of the conference, as you mentioned, every 2 years, did you have a favorite topic, a favorite presentation, a favorite discussion?
Well, I was really busy doing interviews, as people will see. So I didn't really get a chance to actually enjoy any of the sessions. However, I always love the networking part of it. I really love sitting down, talking to people. And I think that agriculture is one of the best industries because we get that opportunity to talk with like-minded individuals and we can learn from each other as much or more sometimes than we learn from sitting in on sessions. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Okay. So everyone, here we go. We're going to hop to a break and I'll be back to bring us in and out of all these segments. But you'll, of course, hear more from Amber Bell in conversation from all of these interviews. So thanks so much, Amber. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
What's next doesn't happen by accident, doesn't happen by chance.
What's next happens when experience meets expertise, when data meets dollars, and when steel meets earth.
What's next happens when the promising work of Pioneer's state-of-the-art research centers meets the unsparing challenges of more than 17,000 on-farm trials.
Our ultimate goal is to bring the next seed breakthrough to your field.
Because Pioneer isn't just our name.
It's our mission. Pioneer.
What's next
Happens here.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Tuesdays with Lyndsey, but really today is sort of Tuesdays with Amber because we've got all her coverage, or a big chunk of the coverage from the Western Canadian Soil Health and Grazing Conference. But a reminder, of course, that it is time to save big on your canola seed for next season. How big? Up to $40 per bag big. Save on the highest yielding DeKalb canola hybrid DK401TL. Visit your local seed retailer or decalbrewards.ca today. That's decalbrewards.ca today. Okay, as promised, we're going to hop now to Amber's conversation with Grant Lastiwka to talk about the conference.
I am speaking with Grant Lastiwka of Renovo. It's great to see you again, Grant.
It's great to see you and all the fun and games of being at this wonderful event.
It's a great event, and there are a lot of things that you and I could talk about, and we have for many hours. But I actually want to chat with you because you have been to every one of these conferences that happen every 2 years, right?
I have, and I was at the inaugural planning one in June of 1994.
1994.
So a long time ago.
That is a long time ago. And so what would you say on, first off, what is the basis of this conference? Why do we do it?
The conference is brought together for all of us that are lifelong learners. Mm-hmm. And the reality of it is the more we learn, the more questions we have, Amber, and you and I have talked about this. And so we're looking to the science for answers, but we're also looking with mutual respect to the producers for practice answers. And we're so blessed here in the wonderful world of forages where people tell you what didn't work.
They do.
And it's amazing. It's a kindred spirit because we're all learners and we learn more from mistakes than successes. So it is the networking Amber is the best part of this event.
Right, and
far.
I haven't been coming for as long as you have, but I know every single time I've come, while the speaker list is incredible, like off the charts, every year, it's great. On the other hand, though, so much happens just walking through the hallways.
It does. We've got the trade fair that was originally part of the inaugural planning meeting. There was a trade fair person, there was a scientist, there was a forage association person, and then we also had an old forage mentor, and we're honoring him a bit this year, and I was tagging along because the scientist was staying at my place in those days to come to an event. And the idea behind all of it was, let's put us together in a place where we all can help each other.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say are some of the trends that you've seen growing throughout those years?
The biggest thing was, I think we looked at it and thought we were forgetting that the beef industry is such a large forage user. Maybe we should make this a beef forage conference. And a few of us argued hard about this. I won't say it. We won by one vote. The idea behind it was, hold on, are we going to lose the forages when we gain the beef? And the reality of it was, it continued to be a forage conference until such time as 2015, Year of Soils. And then we came back to the table and said, you know something? We moved from cattle to forages and realized that unlocked the door of understanding. And now we realize our confusion, as my good friend Don Halliday used to say, a new level of learning, a new plateau, a new level of confusion, was soils. And so lo and behold, it became the Western Canada Conference of Soil Health and Grazing. And it's married itself together really well.
Right, which is, I think that's one of the incredible things, even from the time that I've been joining these conferences, is seeing the change to even having some people in crops in the room now, right? And I mean, as there's a push for cover crops right now, you're definitely seeing that mix, which is really fascinating. And I think when we talk about soil health, like, it just gets, it gets me excited. I don't know.
Me too.
And so what would you say to someone who's considering coming to the conference, and not quite sure? What would you say to that person who's never been here before that might inspire them to be like, hey, I should check this out?
The energy. And that is, I think, what I find. It's rejuvenating, it's thoughtful, it's thought-provoking. And as you listen to speakers, we had Mike Ferguson speaking this morning, and he's a crop farmer from Melfort, Saskatchewan, and how he's employing a lot of these concepts for consideration and keeping the economics on it. And all said and done, it's like so many, sharing what has worked, sharing how they understand it, questioning what they don't understand, and getting input. And I just came from one of the booths. A good friend was trying to help me address some of my problems. And people aren't here, though there's trade fair booths, I've got to admit, and they do sell products, but they can't help themselves. Their passion for the industry, the passion for caring, they're here to help you.
Right.
And that doesn't happen at a lot of conferences. Just that thinking of, how can we come out together better? And I'm going to try my best to be helping you, not really helping myself.
Right. And I think that's why in 30 years, this conference is still going strong. It's fantastic.
Sold out again this year with over 500 people, and we kept it that size because we don't want to lose sight of the fact that the networking, the energy in the room, the fact that people feed off each other so well, can't be lost.
Right. Well, that's incredible. Thank you so much. And that was Grant Lastiwka on Real Agriculture.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, and we're going to, when we hop back, we're going to hear from Bart Lardner, and we're going to talk about winter feeding strategies for cattle and other ruminants right after this.
If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters, and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. And remember that for farmers, trust is everything. Genesis Fertilizers is making real progress toward providing reliable, locally produced fertilizer. Join the ownership group and protect your bottom line. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility. All right, we hop now to the conversation with Bart Lardner and Amber Bell from the Western Canadian Soil Health and Grazing Conference.
I am here today at the Western Canadian Conference on Soil Health and Grazing and getting the chance to catch up with Bart Lardner of the University of Saskatchewan. So welcome, Bart. It's great to see you.
Absolutely. Great to visit with you today, too.
So you always have a lot going on. Tell me what's been going on in your world.
Well, I tell a lot of folks when I do presentations, I do three things. I teach at the university. I teach undergrads and go and teach the vet students across the way, and run a fairly big research program. So we have a pretty big lab group, over a dozen people, and trying to slow down, but it's not working. At this stage of my career, they're asking me to look at more projects and investigations. My whole program is applied cow-calf forage research, so we're trying to do work that's applicable to the cow-calf producer in specifically Western Canada. But the third thing I do is outreach, which is tech transfer, and it's interesting that 28 years ago when I started, that work we've done since then is, they coin it regenerative ag or sustainable ag, and so it's really timely, and now we're being asked to talk about the results to ranchers in the U.S. and ranchers up here in Canada.
That's amazing. And what results have you seen? What's the project?
Well, the big work we did quite a while ago was look at that whole animal-plant soil interface, and so obviously integrating different alternate winter grazing programs, whether it's bale graze, swath graze, stockpile, straw chaff, residue utilization. We were just validating what a lot of producers were finding in terms of rejuvenating old soils, right? So it was kind of neat that, if you have that animal out there on that nutrient deficient acre of land, you're going to capture those manure nutrients.
Yeah.
And that's a huge benefit in terms of saving, going out and buying nitrogen the following spring, but also the response that you see on that tired old pasture was phenomenal. So a lot of that, thinking outside the box, moving away from dry lot confinement management of beef cattle to extensive grazing, and finding the right system that's going to work for you wherever you ranch or wherever you farm.
Right, and winter grazing is always a really hot topic. And I feel like there's been a big uptake in the last little while when it comes to, it's easier. You're not starting a tractor every day necessarily.
Well, I think you have to really do your homework. I always say start small.
Right.
So whatever system you're going to bring onto your operation, if you do have the machinery, if you do have the infrastructure, then don't change things. Hopefully it's paid for. And so, but certainly you're going to have 2 or 3 systems. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. For example, just don't go corn grazing because you might have a bad year and a bad yield. So have 2 or 3 systems to extend the grazing season. And it's driven by economics, it really is. But the big thing you need to look out for is ensure that those cows are in good condition coming into that winter program. And my objective has always been to maintain body condition. We don't want thin cows. Thin cows don't rebreed post-calving. And so, manage and monitor accordingly. And be aware that, we're dealing with with wind chill factors, and so cold stress is the big thing. And so make sure that those are nutrient dense forages they're out there consuming.
Right, so let's talk a little bit about those nutrient dense forages, because a lot of people have been talking about corn and cover crops, and there's, I think we're seeing a lot more integration of this cropping idea in with the cattle. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, we've done a lot of corn grazing research in the past, so we looked at different varieties. We looked at some of those newer low heat unit varieties that were adapted to Western Canada. I was always envious of our Manitoba neighbors or the folks down in Nebraska because they could grow corn. Well, I did not know in my career that we'd be able to look at that as an alternate crop. And so we're grazing in whole plant. It's a little different than they do in Nebraska. There they graze corn stalks, a great low quality residue. So it really is getting some experience and learning how to manage that crop, grazing in whole plant, trying to mitigate rumen acidosis. So that 3 or 4 day allocation, we've shown that maybe a little fiber to buffer that rumen pH will help as well. So that was the corn work that we did, and now we're getting into some of this cover crop conversations, which I think as research scientists we need to be there.
Right, for sure. I was actually out at a place on Monday, Byron Long's, and he's been playing with the width of corn rows and then cover crops in between. Have you seen a fair bit of that happening?
Yes, and in fact I just was talking to a producer up at Spiritwood yesterday who was bugging me all week, and finally we connected. And so he's looking at intercropping, that protein opportunity. And so as we know, corn can be a little bit low on protein for those third trimester beef cows and those calving cows. And so you either have two choices. You grow another species in there with that corn crop to improve the protein content of the diet, or you have to go out and find some protein supplementation. And so we talked the differences, pros and cons of maybe faba beans versus hairy vetch.
Right.
And then we talked about, some of the benefits of both of those potential crops and some of the cautions we need to think about.
Right, and what are some of those cautions? I'd imagine your location is going to be a part of that, your weather and climate.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my mind, faba beans, although they're not really a forage crop, something that we see in front of a beef cow, they are the biggest N fixer. So in terms of biological nitrogen fixation, they will fix the most N for you compared to alfalfa or other, nitrogen fixing plants. So, but are they palatable? Will the cows like them? And so that question's still out there. The jury is still out on that particular project. With the hairy vetch, we see that a lot in mixtures. And so I just caution, you make sure that it is only a certain portion of the diet. We did have some issues, and there is an anti-quality factor associated with too much hairy vetch in the diet. We had an issue last year where producers were feeding bales with too much of that vetch in the bale, and there was some anti-quality and some digestive upsets with the beef cows. And so, it's like anything. You need to be aware of, there's good things about a lot of these forage species, but there's maybe some anti-quality factors we need to be aware of, like glucosinolates or nitrates or other things like that.
Right. So have there been a lot of experiences of bloat when going into cover crops? Like that, I guess I haven't even really considered that.
Well, and so in my mind, we see a couple things happening with these different mixtures. Is that we have the simple mixtures, which are 3 or 4 species, and then we have the complex mixtures, which could be 12 plus or maybe even 20, who knows.
Right.
But I'm always telling or asking the producer, if you're going to buy that mixture, I want to make darn sure all 20 of those species are actually going to germinate and contribute to the biomass. I don't want to pay for extra seed that does nothing for me, right?
Using, yeah.
So that's one thing. And in the work we've done, the other thing we're addressing is obviously some of the claims in terms of soil health or improving soil characterization, specifically soil organic carbon. And so I'm going to talk about that here in my talk tomorrow morning, is that, I think we're just trying to validate some of those claims that we're hearing about the companies that are selling cover crops. And so, yes, in my mind, I'm kind of leaning towards the simple 3 or 4 species versus maybe the complex of 12 plus. That's just my opinion. And
right.
So, and I also tell producers, make sure that every species in that variety is adapted to wherever you farm your ranch, right? You don't want to be buying warm season species that are not going to germinate or produce for you. And so There's some issues in terms of nitrates. We do see with a lot of brassicas in these mixtures some issues with sulfates, and so high sulfur content, as we know, we don't want to get over 0.4% of total diet of sulfur, and so it does have an antagonistic effect on trace mineral absorption by the beef cow, like copper, zinc, and manganese, and so we need to be aware of the level or the amount of brassicas in that mixture, and so just some things we need to think through when we go to maybe bringing them into our grazing system.
Right, and I guess my final question, have you looked into a lot of the economics of the practices, and what are you seeing? Well,
economics has always been a big part of my program, and I've worked with probably the best production economist, that's Kathy Larson, in my career, and so we're always, every research study we do, every grad student we have on a project, we bring that economic component into it. But I always tell producers, you know what, these are our numbers in the location we did it, in the years that we did it. What is your cost of production? And so that challenges them to go back and take their own notes and maybe figure out what is their input cost. You know what, I think I'm coming away thinking these cover crops do have an opportunity. They might fit that window, that summer slump, that fallish time period. Maybe if you put the pea and the cereal in there, they're going to bring more energy, content to that diet. In some cases, I think they are comparable to some of our monoculture barley swath graze programs, but once we get into these, complex 12 plus species in the mix, maybe their input costs are going to be a little expensive, and so you need to think about that as well.
On years like this year, where the market has been really good for cattle.
Well, yeah, who knew we'd have $4 calves in 2024, right? They're fetching $2,000 a pop or more.
So crazy.
So feedlots are buying them. Feedlots are still seeing a profit on the back end because those barley prices are moving for the feedlot diet, right? So,
right. I guess it's just finding that balance, though, there, because we're not always going to have amazing prices.
Yeah, no, I think cover crops do have a good fit. It's just, how many species do I want in the mix, and when am I going to go out there and graze them?
That's incredible. Well, I really appreciate seeing you, and that was Bart Lardner on Real Agriculture.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back talking to Kevin Elmy, talking about corn and cover crops right after this.
Here's what Wheat Pete's word on RealAgriculture.com is all about in under 30 seconds.
It's wheat time. I love wheat time. I love wheat. Get that sulfur on. Get that seeding rate right. Get that nitrogen on your wheat right. Get that protein. Know your variety. Know when you need to put fungicides on. Pick your product. Pick your rate. Do the right job. Get this wheat crop right. Have a nice day. Grow amazing wheat.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Tuesday, December 17th. A reminder to excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more at excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca. We hop now to Amber Bell's conversation with Kevin Elmy. This also from the conference. We're going to talk about cover crops and corn. And that might seem sort of run-of-the-mill for many of you, except for that, well, Kevin's based in Saskatchewan, and he's been doing this a very long time. Let's hear now from Kevin and Amber Bell.
And I'm sitting with Kevin Elmy of Cover Crops Canada. So it's great to see you again, Kevin.
Oh, likewise. I haven't seen you for a while.
It's been like a month?
Exactly.
Agri-Trade was the last time. So you do a lot of different things, and cover crops is something you're very well known for. One of the big things that has been on producers' minds is putting cover crops into corn, and we've been seeing a little bit more of it. So can you just kind of give a little bit of background on that, maybe where it's started up and how that's working?
Oh, and that's, that's one of the evolving markets is the cover cropping in corn, because the whole thought process is with corn, you don't want competition with the corn. But we have to remember back in the Native Americans, when they were growing maize, they had the three sisters. They had the legume, they had the broadleaf, and they had the grass. So what we want to do is minimize those competitive species that we're going to be planting either with or in the corn, and early on add synergistic plants. So synergistic plants are basically your skinny plants that will be growing upwards, that are going to be highly mycorrhizal, that will be sharing nutrients with that corn. And so what we've found on our farm in eastern Saskatchewan is seeding annual clovers with our corn worked really well.
Okay. And so, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, producers are looking to make money, growers are looking to make money. What are the economics on those practices?
So we did the one trial with a dairy just south of Winnipeg, and what we did is a 20-acre patch of these annual clovers in with conventional corn, went in with Accent and bromoxynil at herbicide time, and what they found is where this 20 acres, where they had the cover crop on really heavy clay, is the corn grew about 1.5 feet taller, cobs were longer, the plants were green, retained the leaves right down to the ground, right up until silage. Heavy clay, so the clays weren't cracking, and you moved that one row over where there was no understory cover crop. The corn was shorter, the cobs were shorter, the soil was cracking, and the bottom 4 leaves fell off.
Wow.
Then they screwed up on the on silaging, and by the time the guy got out there and caught the chopper, they already chopped all the 20 acres and they started into the main field, so they lost all of their data. So visually, they saw a difference.
Right. So when you're going out and talking to people, do you find people are using cover crops? Because I have seen it in forage mixes, but do you find that they're actually using it when it comes to grain crops?
So the grain crops, this is one of the things when we look at once again, I have my background. I worked with Jeff Shano at the U of S for a year and a half during my degree. I started my postgrad diploma with him with soil chemistry, and when I do a soil test, I've yet to see a soil test where calcium is low. Yet, when we look at the calcium availability during the growing season, we're seeing some deficiencies in the plants that relate back to low calcium.
Right.
So one of the ways we can keep this going is keeping a plant in the vegetative stage for as many days as we can through the growing season to get the mycorrhizae going, cycle nutrients, and free up these nutrients, keep that biology alive. And this is where at the conference today, Dr. James White was talking about rhizophagy, and when we have a corn plant which is really heavy feeder, we want to minimize that competition, but yet we want to keep that ground covered. We want to keep that biology alive. We want to keep those root exudates going. We want to get the system alive.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so when we can do that, now we're going to start seeing changes in our soil. We're going to see the changes in the way our plants respond through the growing season.
Right. So going back to that economic piece, how much, what are you recommending when people are saying, okay, well, how much fertilizer do I need to put on? Are you finding there's a benefit in the fertilizer or even in disease and pest management? Where's that going?
Oh, yeah, that's a tricky part. So Sir Albert Howard, back in the 1940s, he was the godfather of organic production practices, and one of the things that he got frustrated with the British farmers is they're giving up on old-time agronomy. They were relying on the synthetic inputs because synthetic inputs are consistent, relatively consistent.
You know what you're getting. Ish. But the biological, if your legumes aren't well nodulated, if it's too dry, if it's too wet, you have a moly deficiency, whatever, and you don't fix the nitrogen, then you're faltering. Mm-hmm. So when we go through and looking at this biological system, it's what else are we doing? Right.
What are our goals? What are we trying to do? Those are really important. So if it is looking at reducing the amount of nitrogen we need to add, or avoiding this nitrogen deficiency late in the season, you lean on the legumes and maybe crank up those legumes. How much can you save? That's the
so really soil testing, when it comes down to it, is what you're going to need to do before.
But the tricky thing with the soil testing is, because we are doing organic nutrient acquisition, they won't show up in a traditional soil test.
Oh, okay.
So that this way, when this legume is fixing nitrogen, you get the mycorrhizae bridge over to the corn, we don't have a good read of how much nitrogen is going to be able to be transferred over. I have some rules of thumb that developed from our farm, but how consistent are they across Western Canada, Eastern Canada, into the States? I don't know.
Is there a lot of research going on with that? I know there's a lot of producers doing it and playing around with it, but any actual research?
And I think they're getting deeper into it. Once again, it's in the regenerative world. What we're finding is the farmers are going out doing it, seeing some amazing results, and then the researchers have to come in and try to figure out why. So until we have that good research to go out and say this is what we can expect from it, it's tough. But yet on the flip side, if we go in and we're doing whether it's sap testing, tissue testing in season, have these clovers underneath the corn, when the corn gets into that V6, maybe adding a biennial grass into it, adding that plant diversity, doing that tissue testing, doing the foliar feed with nitrogen if required, then we have a system that we're going to start making a lot more money out of it.
Right.
Because we're not front loading with all the nutrients. When we front load with nutrients, then we are gearing ourselves up to produce more weeds, more disease. So that when we start gearing back on front loading, especially nitrogen, adding organic nitrogen, and then foliar feeding to top it up, farming becomes a lot more profitable.
That's incredible. I love it. And any words of encouragement to producers or growers that are maybe thinking about trying out some of this stuff, not sure, where would you tell them to start?
Once again, if when we look at putting species together, we have to remember in plant ecology, in nature, legumes and grasses grow together.
Right.
They're not, once again, it goes back to rate, it goes back to timing. If you seed corn into an established alfalfa stand, it's not going to work well. You seed, once again, let's take a step back. Jay Fear down at the Manikin Farms in Bismarck, North Dakota, he had his corn seeded. Then the crew came in right before the corn came up and seeded an alfalfa, pure alfalfa stand into that corn crop right before it emerged. So the corn came out of the ground. The alfalfa takes 2 weeks to get out of the ground after. So by that time the corn is up, the alfalfa is slow and it's growing. It's building mycorrhizae. It's starting to fix some nitrogen. It's helping that corn get up and going. And his weed pressure was extremely low. So there's these things that we can do. It's out of the box. And the fun thing about that experiment that they did was, last I talked to him, he thought that was going to be the highest yielding corn strip out of his 6 trials.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it's doing something different, using species that help, not competitive. So your brassicas are competitive, your cool season grasses are competitive in your corn. Legumes work with corn.
Fascinating stuff. Well, thank you, Kevin. It's great to see you again, and I'll let you get back to the conference. And that was Kevin Elmy on Real Agriculture.
All right, we've got one more segment to go here on this Tuesday, December 17th. It's time to bring this all together and talk about profitability. So stick around. We'll be back with that right after this.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. But honestly, I'm just here to usher in all these segments and take you back out. Although I guess I'll stick around after to close out the show as well. But have no fear, I'm actually back on Thursday for the Farmer Rapid Fire and, of course, the Issues panel on Friday. Dougie, do we have a lot to talk about on Friday? Of course, after Christy Freeland's resignation yesterday. And my head is still spinning, I'll be honest, with all the news that happened yesterday and, of course, that continues today with this move. Would love to get your feedback, of course, on what's happening politically. You can always call that RealAg listener line 1-855-776-6147 or send me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. But of course, in the meantime, this segment brought to you by MMP. So maximize that productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming. Combine accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology with MMP Ag Intellect. MMP Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. Visit mmp.ca today. All right, it is time for our last segment. This is all about ranching and profitability with Amber Bell. This is, of course, from the Western Canadian Grazing and Soils Conference.
Hi, I'm Amber Bell, and this is Real Agriculture. I'm here today at the Western Canada Conference on Soil Health and Grazing, and sitting with Burke Teichert. It's great to see you, Burke.
It's good to be here.
So I've been wanting to talk to you for quite a while. You do a lot of different things. Let's talk a little bit about your background before we get off and running. We're going to be talking about profitability and ranching, but let's talk about some of your other stuff.
Background could last a long time.
Yeah?
I was born and raised in southwest Wyoming, raised on a family cattle ranch, and had an idyllic childhood, but graduated high school there, went to Brigham Young University to get a bachelor's degree, interrupted that for 3 years to serve a mission for my church in Brazil, and then back and finished the degree. Then went to the University of Wyoming and got a master's degree there. Both of those degrees were in ag economics. One with an emphasis in agribusiness, the other with an emphasis in farm and ranch management. And I thought I was a ready-made ranch manager, but I wasn't. And so I got a job in the AI industry.
In the AI, cool.
Not artificial intelligence, but the other AI. And that sort of built animal science around the ag business.
Right, yeah.
Formal education that I had. And, that industry introduced me to some of the best animal scientists in America of the day. Mm-hmm. And some of those people became very good mentors for me.
That's amazing.
And it'd take me a week, so I'm not going to tell you all the stories of how I moved from one job to another there, but along the way I ended up quitting 2 jobs without having the next job, but I found the next job real quickly both times. Mm. And hopefully that was because I left a pretty good track record behind me.
Right.
And but I ended up, getting a first general manager job on a ranch. And the people who hired me shouldn't have hired me based on the information I gave them. But I'd had a mentor prior to that taught me some keys about how to manage people.
Cool.
And so when I accepted that job, I inherited some people on the payroll that were good. I recognized that they were good and put them in places where they could do us the most good. Mm-hmm. I think I had some capability of helping them use their talents to their fullest and maybe even become better.
Right.
And then, so we were successful out the gate. And so I developed a reputation right away for being able to manage ranches profitably.
Right. And I think that's a really well-rounded background, because one, you're known for speaking about profitability and ranching situations and about ranching practices in general. So today you were speaking about profitability and ranching.
Yeah.
And what were some of the real key points that were just like, hey, I hope people get this?
Well, there are a number of key points, but I like to talk about profitable ranching with an emphasis on soil health, grazing management, and adapted cattle. And those three things work in concert with each other.
Right.
Naturally you build grazing management into the soil health aspect, and but that's what kicks off profitability. If you do those things right, profitability is going to get better.
Right. And what do you mean by adapted cattle?
Cattle adapt to your management and the environment and do it on low inputs, low cost.
Right.
So there's three important ratios. How many acres does it take to run a cow? Now, from wet country to dry country, that's a big difference, but in your environment, if you can reduce the number of acres is required to run a cow, that's huge economic lever. Then cows per full-time person. The more cows one person can run, and I don't want to make them work harder. I just want them to work smarter, more organized, better. And I've developed techniques for how to do that.
Yeah.
So that we work smarter, but one person can run more and more and more cattle without having to work any harder.
Right.
And so as we can run more cows per person, salary is not all that an employee costs a ranch. Oftentimes you house them, you provide certain benefits. You've got to have tools for them to do their job. You have to have conveyance to get them around the ranch, whether that be horses, four-wheelers, side-by-sides, whatever.
Right.
And all of that stuff, time you add that together,
it costs a lot of money.
It's probably 120% addition to their salary.
Wow.
No, their salary and then 120% on top of it.
On top of it. Which makes sense. Like the opportunity cost on that is just incredible.
Well, these are not opportunity costs. These are real costs. Money you spend to keep them employed.
Yeah.
To get them outfitted, equipped, tools, etc., that they need to be able to do their job well.
Yeah.
And so you got acres per cow, cows per person, and then fed feed versus grazed feed. And the more of the feed that can be grazed, and the less you have to feed, the more profitable your operation is going to be. So all the things you work on should work to build those key ratios.
So what do you recommend to a producer that maybe is struggling a little bit, and what would be their first steps in trying to figure out where the problem's coming in?
Well, assess where you are in that situation. What is your cows per person ratio? How many acres per cow? And what is it going to take to improve those ratios? You just need to be honest with yourself and where are you?
Right.
And is your marketing good? Do you know how to market well what you have? And I don't want to be mean, but most ranchers don't. They just sell. They just take them to the auction yard when it's time to sell, or they need a little money and
take what they can get.
And take what they can get, and they don't strategize and figure out how to make this complement of livestock that I need to sell be worth more money all the time.
Right.
And so marketing is really important, and getting excellent herd fertility, and that's important to cull the right cows and have the right bulls.
Yeah.
And because I'm asking cattle to be adapted to their environment, but the ones that are fertile in that environment are the ones that are adapted. So those are the ones you want to have reproducing.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's been more talk, I think, about the genetic process in that, and the thinking process on what do you want in a herd when you're breeding?
I want fertility, first of all. That every animal that has a live calf, that's something I can sell.
Right.
If they don't have a live calf, they fed them and I don't get a calf.
That makes sense.
That's a big problem, and I don't go for big high EPDs. Matter of fact, I seldom use EPDs anymore. I just want cows that can have a calf, a live calf, with very little intervention from me. I don't want to have to touch them. I want them to be totally trouble-free.
Minimal inputs.
Right, and on low inputs. Now, naturally, we got to feed them. They do have to have grass to graze.
Yeah.
For as much of the year as possible. And, you know, in these northern countries, we're going to have to use a little protein supplementation if they're expected to eat dry grass in the wintertime. And the snow can't get too deep, and we're going to have to substitute feed a little bit. But a lot of places we can minimize that, though.
You really can.
You know, the interesting thing is ranchers in Alabama feed as much hay as ranchers in Canada.
Do they really?
They do. It's a habit.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And what would you say to, because I mean the cattle markets have been really strong, like this year's been incredible. What would this be a good chance for people to maybe introduce into their operations? What would you recommend for people to do on strong markets?
Jump out of your paradigm lockdown. Kick a hole in the side of your box and start a... These cattle prices are going to fall.
Yeah.
And a lot of ranchers right now are at the edge from a profit standpoint. So take this opportunity, these high prices, to learn different things and do different things. Doing the things we've always done a little bit better is not going to be enough.
Right.
We've got to change what we do. And sometimes those changes are marked changes. I mean, they're significant changes. And a lot of people have trouble wrapping their minds around that, but they don't have a choice if they want to stay in the business. They're going to have
on how to
do
make
it.
the big changes.
Right.
And is there a way, I don't really know, like I know in the cropping world you have agronomists and people you can go to that can kind of help with a lot of things. So do you see that there's a lot of financial help for ranchers out there that are looking for some advice or?
You know, there are a few consultants, but they're darn few, that really know how to step into that world.
Right.
There are some pretty good courses offered, you know, one place or another. Short courses that people can go and take and learn.
Right.
But there's some people offering courses that aren't very good too, but there's some that are quite good, in fact.
Quite good ones.
Where you can learn and start to take these steps to make it better.
Right, because sometimes it just starts with one small step to learn something new, right?
You have to become a lifelong learner, and you can't be engaged in paradigm lockdown. You've got to say, hey, let's be open-minded. Let's look at all the things, and sometimes to look at all the things, you've got to be introduced to other people, other things.
Right.
So sometimes you hear people doing these stupid things. Maybe those things aren't so stupid. Maybe you need to go see what they're doing.
That's a good thing.
And say, would that work at my place? Could I do it? Could I do it here?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us on Real Agriculture.
All right. And of course, huge thank you to Amber Bell for bringing us all of these reports from this event. It's a fantastic day. Well, it's a 2-day conference. A little sad I didn't get to go. It is, of course, near and dear to my heart as well. There is plenty more coverage, though. Check back often. There's always new things going up. I think we post 4 or 5 stories a day from, of course, everything from politics, issues and policy, all the way to production, crops, livestock, you name it. And of course, markets. Hang around for tomorrow's show when Sean Haney will be back to talk markets as well. Did want to send a shout out for all of you who joined me last night on The Agronomist. We talked about pulse production, had Laura Schmidt and Michelle Hubbard joining me. Fantastic hour talking about some of the disease challenges of pulses. So also check that out. That's on our YouTube channel under our live tab, or you can head to realagriculture.com/agronomists. Next week, the 23rd of December, 8 p.m. Eastern. Yes, we are having a show on the 23rd. I know plenty of people who have the desk job have probably sort of, they're cruising through to the holiday season. I know that we are all looking forward to a rest. But hey, we're going to keep rolling right through to the 24th. And so on Monday night, I've got Peter Pete Johnson and Ray DeBanco joining me on The Agronomist. We're going to do a recap of the year. So we've got a Western focus and Eastern focus. We're going to talk about all the big agronomy topics of the year. So please, if you're interested in catching The Agronomist, mark 8 p.m. Eastern in your calendars for Monday. Join us live on YouTube. We share the link on X and on Facebook, and of course on Real Agriculture as well. But YouTube is usually where all the comments are. So if you're going to watch live, I highly recommend hang out there on YouTube. That's where all the cool kids are. Okay. As always, thank you so much for joining me for RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. Your regular host, Sean Haney, will be back tomorrow with our Wednesday show, and I'll be back, as I mentioned, on Thursday for the Farmer Rapid Fire. And you do not want to miss Friday's issues panel, where we are going to unpack what we know, what we've learned. Of course, we did get word late last week about the sustainable ag strategy, perhaps falling on its face. And then, of course, all the political wrangling that has happened now this week as well. So check that out, 4:30 Eastern, right here on Rural Radio, Channel 147. Cheers, everybody.